We want to thank everybody for attending this Club Luncheon. Again, I'd like to mention our Club Luncheon sponsor, Albrecht and Albrecht Law Firm, and they've been supporting this luncheon for, I guess, almost since the beginning, if not the beginning. So if you need legal help, please think about calling them and supporting our sponsor. That's Albrecht and Albrecht. Our program today will feature Morgan Carroll. She is the chair of the Colorado Democratic Party, and I'll introduce her after we talk about our procedures for these remote luncheons. So first of all, we'd like to ask everybody to stay muted in terms of your audio, except for the speakers and myself, and then Kathy Devine and Karen Pontius that will be handling questions. If you want to submit a question while the speaker is talking, and speakers typically do appreciate questions, so use the chat window that you can find down at the bottom. Just put it in there, put your question in there, and then Kathy or Karen will ask Morgan at the end of her presentation your questions. And make sure you send the questions to everyone in the chat window. You can actually send information to just one person if you want to, but we need it to go to the one that's labeled everyone. If you're having trouble with your internet connectivity, you may want to disable your video. Audio only works better on slower connections, and so you can click on the stop video button down at the lower part, and there'll be a red line through it once you've stopped. This Zoom meeting is being recorded, and it should be available within a few days for viewing. So if you know people who couldn't attend, or if you have to get off before the end and you want to follow up on the meeting, you'll be able to do that. You can also choose speaker mode, typically in the upper right corner, which will bring up a larger video of the person who's speaking. So if you're seeing me right now kind of full screen, then you're good. If you're seeing just small images of everyone, including me, then again, go to the view up in the upper right and select speaker mode. Talk a little bit about fundraising. Obviously, some of the La Plata County Dem's biggest fundraisers had to be canceled due to the pandemic. So again, I'd like to encourage everybody to donate to the party. And there's really a very easy way to do that. If you go into Act Blue, you can donate monthly. So if you want to donate $5 or $10 or $20, whatever it is that you feel reasonable doing, you can just set that up as a monthly donation and you hardly notice that it's gone. And of course, you can also do that for the state party. So this is our last club luncheon for 2020. We will not have one in December. It's certainly been an interesting and unusual year, to say the least. We're working on our luncheons for 2021. And if you have any suggestions on interesting topics or speakers, please contact us and let us know. And if anyone has any other announcements to make, please enter something in the chat window and we'll recognize you at the end of the luncheon. So before we get started with Morgan, I know that Marsha Porter Norton wanted to say a few words. So Marsha, can you unmute?
Can you hear me?
Yep, you're good.
Good. First of all, I want to acknowledge that Gwen Lackhelt is on this Zoom luncheon. And if all goes well, I will be replacing her on Friday. And I might get a little choked up here. I couldn't be where I'm at without Gwen. And I have been on every Zoom call imaginable and going to meetings before the lockdown. And she is an amazing commissioner. And she's a public servant. She cares about everybody. And we just owe her a big, giant thumbs up, applause. Thank you, Gwen. So yay. And I wish you the best. And I think a lot of people wish you the best as you go on past serving your 2 terms. And just really thank you for everything you are and all you've done. Matt has a work thing to do today. He's because his election is known and he's in Cortez starting to close out one of his businesses. And he just wanted to say thank you to all of you for your support and your fundraising and your cheerleading and all you did. And I want to say that too. I feel good that I will get good news on Friday. I wish it wasn't this close, but we know county commissioner races can be close in La Plata County. And I am really proud of my campaign, my 133 volunteers. We raised over $72,000. I'm looking at everybody on this screen and all of you played a role at some point. And I thank you, and I just can't thank you enough. And if we hadn't done all this work and outworked Jack by 2 or 3 times, the election night might have gone differently. differently. And so I really want to thank Carroll and Jean Walter, who are leading the curing process. And I see some people on this call making calls, and it's tedious and trying to find all these people that need their ballot cured, but I appreciate all the work, and I am a proud Democrat. It's been great to run as a Democrat, and I will serve everybody, and it's just been a great ride, and look for a Facebook announcement from me on Friday that hopefully I will be your next commissioner. And again, Gwen, thank you so much. And I owe you lunch after this is over with. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Marcia. It's certainly been an honor to support you. I think you're going to make a great commissioner. We also have Barbara McLaughlin, who is in the meeting, and I'd like to see if she'd like to say a few words. I'm sure everybody's aware that she was elected to her third term.
Yay! I just want to say, first of all, thank you, Marcia. Our fingers are crossed for you, and we're going to have a little party somewhere, somehow, to celebrate when you do make it over the finish line, because we know you will. So go, Marcia. And thanks, Gwen, for all your help and all your years of work. We really, really appreciate you as our county commissioner. And I just want to say thank you to all the Democrats in La Plata County. You really helped push me over. You know, I have 6 counties and I won 4 of them. And La Plata County is, of course, my most important one because I live here. And I'm just so supportive. I'm so grateful for all of your support. So thank you very much. And I'll do another 2 years of listening to you and running bills that affect you in a very positive way. So thank you.
Thanks, Barbara. I suspect this upcoming session is going to be another tough one, but I know Barbara will do her absolute best to take care of everyone in her district. So I want to introduce Morgan Carroll, and she's going to give us an election update or follow-up presentation. Morgan is the chairwoman of the Colorado Democratic Party, so that's the state party. She's a lifelong Coloradan, graduating from the University of Colorado in Denver and from the University of Colorado Law School. She previously represented Colorado House District 36 in Aurora from 2004 to 2008 and Colorado's 29th Senate District beginning in 2009, serving as Senate President from 2013 to 2014 and as Minority Leader in 2015. In 2015, she stepped down as Minority Leader to become the 2016 Democratic nominee in Colorado's 6th Congressional District for the U.S. House of Representatives. And as if that's not enough, she's also the author of a 2001 book, Take Back Your Government, A Citizen's Guide to Grassroots Change. So let's give a big virtual welcome to Morgan Carroll.
Hi, Gwen. Hi, everybody. It's good to be back with the club for today. And what adaptability, I guess, that we're all seeing each other this way. So it's good to see everybody. I am going to share my screen here and we'll go through a bit of a political update and then save time for your questions. So let me get my slides going and hopefully it worked again the second time, Gwen, right?
Looks good.
All right. So I guess just starting big picture, Colorado was one of the beautiful, clear states really on election night on the national scene. And we really didn't see necessarily a huge blue wave. We're holding our own, but in Colorado, we did extremely well. And we'll kind of go over some of what we did and do a quick recap here. So this state, when we went for Biden and Harris, that was by nearly 11 points. And that is the biggest margin this state has delivered for a Democrat, including both Barack Obama terms. So 55 is still like, I want it to be 100%, but we actually broke our own record in Colorado by having a win with that kind of margin, thankfully. And so our elections went quite well. The other thing that stood out nationally is, you know, I think we were all pretty disappointed that Maine didn't flip and that some of the other swing Senate seats didn't, but we did know on election night that we had replaced Cory Gardner with an upgrade in John Hickenlooper, and that was by nearly a 9-point margin. And that polling number was pretty consistent. It was between 9 and 10% pretty much throughout the whole time. So clearly we're in good shape when it comes. Now, obviously, both of our US senators in the state of Colorado are Democrats. In the congressional realm, you know, we held all of ours. Colorado took a majority of our 7 seats as Democratic back in 2018 when Jason Crow won. We held that majority status, but I think folks on this call know too well that we were not able to flip the 3rd congressional district, and I'm so sorry. Yuck. I'm so sorry. So we were a hold there. I will say that Jason Crow, within the course of 2 years, took a seat that was over 10 years for us to flip, and with 57% coming in, he blew it out of the water and has basically taken that seat off the table. So that is pretty incredible. Our State Board of Education had 3 seats up, and also in the 3rd district, we were not able to win Mailing Simpson either, along with Diane Mitch Bush. But for those of you who got to know her, she's an amazing woman, ran a great campaign. And what we did see, we've got 2 new members. So while District 1 is very Democratic, like Diana DeGette's district is, and District 7 is the same as Ed Perlmutter's, Lisa Skarsaga is new, and Carla Esser is new, and look forward to you getting to know them, even though they're not in the 3rd. And we flipped the majority of the State Board of Education back in 2016 when Rebecca McClellan flipped the 6th district. So we retained our majority on the State Board of Education. But we flipped, for the first time in 40 years, the CU Board of Regents. And that's the tuition stuff, but that has become so politicized lately, where they don't want to fund, you know, stem cell research. Yeah, they have weird policies about more rights for guns on campus than sexual assault survivors. So it really does matter that we have flipped this majority. And that was the 6th district that flipped with Alana Spiegel. New candidates here as well. In District 2, Callie Renison is replacing the outgoing Linda Shoemaker, and Nolbert Chavez is replacing Jane Goff, who is in the 7th district. So we've got a lot of new folks coming in on those positions as well. We focused on DA's races, and the 2 that we know we have flipped are Judicial District 1, which is Alexis King, and she replaced Republican Pete Weir. A woman has never held that office, and I'm not sure how far back we would have to go, if ever, to a Democrat holding that office. And this is also a first. Gordon flipped Judicial District 8, and that's Larimer and Jackson County. And so 2 known flips for DA's seats, and we're in the middle of curing in Judicial District 18 for Amy Padden. But that includes my hometown of Aurora, that has been the poster child of mass incarceration and over-incarceration of people of color. And we have not had an elected DA there that understands the value of restitution and the role that profiling can play in disparate outcomes. So we're really watching that one closely. Excuse me, in the state Senate, we actually flipped another seat. So 2018 was pretty record-breaking in that when we first got the trifecta, we picked up a lot of previously Republican seats, and we added one more in the Senate with Chris Kolker in Senate District 27. And he not only flipped it, but he did it by 10 points. So right now, the makeup of the Colorado Senate is 20 Democrats and 15 Republicans. And for us locally, that makes a really big difference in terms of getting policy through. That we have the governor, attorney general, secretary of state, treasurer, but those 1 or 2 vote margins can make it sometimes tougher to get things through. And that 20 to 15 will be really nice for us. When we in 2018 got 41 Democrats in the state house, that is the largest majority since 1936. We held that, but in a slightly different configuration. So we flipped and picked up David Ortiz in House District 38. That was a Republican seat. If you haven't met David yet, he's a veteran in a service-related incident. He was paralyzed from the waist down. He's in a wheelchair. He's been doing veterans advocacy work in our community for a while, ran an amazing campaign. But the loss, and this is why we're staying at 41 Democrats to 24 Republicans in the makeup of our state house now. We lost Bri Buenteo, which is one of our Southern Colorado seats, as you guys know, in House District 49. And that was a really hard loss. That was a targeted priority seat. Her district is overwhelmingly a Trump-leaning district. And she had an opponent that had some massive child support and family problems that kind of helped get her there 2 years ago. And they ran a stronger Republican this time. So we lost Bri Buenteo in House District 49 to a Republican. So hello, La Plata. Like, here's you guys looking good and like amazing. So I think you know this because you're all in La Plata. But huge shout out to the county. So right now, out of registered voters, you guys are showing an 86.8% voter turnout among active registered voters. Holy cow, history making, even for La Plata by your own high standards. And for Colorado, and just on the same metric we all really kicked some butt. Colorado's number of active registered voters is 84.83. That breaks a record for us. And just for comparison, that figure is 66.4% nationally. So we really did kick butt. There's just no other way to say it. And in a state that did really well, you guys did even better. And we just met Representative McLaughlin again. So thank you for returning her to the legislature. You guys delivered, and people think that those seats are slam dunk. They are not. That is a hard seat to win and to run. And because of the work you did in La Plata, you made sure that we returned Representative McLaughlin. And 2 out of 2 commission seats, like, you guys have some tough shoes to fill. You've had a history of just amazing commissioners in here. And obviously we're doing everything we can to support the CURE effort to make sure that Marcia is joining you as your new commission as well. If CD3 were La Plata, we would have had a different outcome. You guys voted for Diane Mitch Bush by over 56%. So we just need to get the rest of CD3 kind of to La Plata level here, and maybe changes in redistricting, reapportionment. We'll talk about that in a minute. But we would have elected Diane Mitch Bush and Mei Ling Simpson for state board if La Plata were how the rest of CD3 performed. And then, while uncontested, you guys reelected Christian Champagne, who's your DA for JD6. So really, you're a sweep. I mean, just a sweep. For all of the seats that you have been able to touch. Your county delivered so strong that a big shout out to the La Plata Dems for your role in our statewide wins as well. So just to give you a sense of some other parts in the rest of the state, Arapahoe County flipped a commissioner seat in Carrie Warren Gully, and that is the first time Arapahoe County has had a majority of Democrats ever. So Carrie Warren Gully is in, and we're also curing for Idris Keith to see if we can actually potentially flip a second seat in Arapahoe County. Conejos County flipped a seat. Joseph Barros was the Democrat who won in a previously held Republican seat there. In Huerfano, flipped a Republican seat in Erica Andreata for their commission. Tracy Kraft Tharp beat Republican Libby Szabo. So they flipped one more seat in Jeffco. They're now 3-0 on their makeup. So they got the majority 2 years ago. They are now 3-0. Larimer County really knocked it out of the park. They flipped 2 seats, also for the first time majority on their commission with Jody and with Kristen. And Uray also flipped 2 seats. One of them was also a U versus a D which might sound familiar here. Jake Neese's race was a D versus U, and Lynn was versus a Republican there. So, you know, when we take a view of the state, we saw that we did do quite well all the way through to the local level as well. Close margins, tough, but we built on our record-breaking numbers that we had in 2018. Ballot measures, a mixed bag. As you guys know, we passed Amendment B. That is amazing. We would have been looking at $400 million in extra cuts to K-12 education if that had not passed. So we're basically at status quo in terms of not needing new funding cuts because we did, and it pulled out like one of those knots out of our Constitution. Amendment C on gaming failed. The state party didn't take a position on that. This one's really disappointing. Even in La Plata County, Amendment 76 passed, and that's the one that was saying only citizens can vote, and was always tricky because it struck the word every citizen can vote. So it removed the universal guarantee of franchise, and it tied it into 18-year-old or over. So all of those 17-year-olds able to pre-vote in primary if they're 18 by election day are no longer going to be able to do that. Amendment 77 on local decisions in gaming did pass. The party didn't have a position there. We did support the nicotine tax in Prop EE, and we also supported the national popular vote, and both of those did pass. The Wolves was one of our closest. The party didn't have a position there, but that looks like that's going to pass and be outside of recount. We defeated the prop. This one was 50-50 for a while. The folks working on defeating the abortion ban all the way up until the last 10 days or so or week was looking like it was almost tied. And so that was a criminalizing abortion ban, and Colorado came through pretty handily there. But we passed a regressive across the board tax cut, which is going to hurt in a pandemic next year. There will be lots of cuts to services that are going to have to come from that. And making a voters vote on fee increases, just like we do on Tabor taxes, is going to add to the fiscal knot we have in this state. So those were definitely two pieces of financial bad news for us. But on the good news front, family leave did pass pretty overwhelmingly in the state. So that will get to work on implementation starting this year. Overall, Colorado has been a high voter turnout state for a while, and we broke our midterm record in 2018, and we clearly broke our 2016 record here, in fact, our state record. So for the state, we turned out just shy of 85% of all active registered voters. And of the people who turned out, another way to look at it is among registered Democrats, 86% of registered Democrats turned out, 78% of registered unaffiliateds turned out, and 85% of registered Republicans turned out. In the scheme of things, that's actually high turnout for all parties. So the wins we had weren't because the Dems showed up and everybody else stayed home. This is very record-breaking turnout actually across all three of the major political parties. A different way of calculating this is voting eligible population, and that takes a look at everybody, whether they're registered or not. If you were legally allowed to be registered and eligible to vote, what percentage of that universe voted? And so in the country, that figure was 66.4% of all eligible voting age people, in fact, voted. In Colorado, for this cycle, 77% of all voting eligible age people voted. And so we are 11% higher than the national average, even in this record-breaking 2020 election. And for a little background, we were breaking records then in 2016, where we were 71.9 at that time. So we have upped our own here. by 6.8% over the last record-breaking presidential year turnout for the state. All right. So I think we've all been watching this. I think most of you maybe watched Kamala Harris and Joe Biden with their speeches this weekend. Pretty incredible. The good news for us on this is that we're not coming down to one state. Any shenanigans that Trump wants to do are easier if it's one state. We now have pulled ahead in so many states, and Trump keeps losing, thankfully, all of his lawsuits. So we're all watching this, but we should all be collectively relieved that we're not coming down to like Florida or Pennsylvania or only one state to get Biden to 270. So we're still counting in some states there. This was maybe, depending on how high your hopes were set, I really was hoping we could see a majority flip on the US Senate to get rid of McConnell on election night. Right now, I would say the probability is very tough for us getting a majority, but the path that remains is both Georgia Senate seats are now going to a runoff in January. And the other, this Alaska looks red right now, but they had only about 50% of their votes counted. And in their case, it's a U versus an R, and their U might be able to flip this seat by the time the votes are all in and counted. He's a well-liked and respected local physician in Alaska. He's like 3 generations of a family that is locally known and very beloved in Alaska. And the last votes to be counted in Alaska are the mail ballots, which were favoring us. So like, if we believe in hopes and underdogs and long shots, we can, you know, there's a theoretical path to the majority still that is not off the table. In the House, we still kept our majority in the National House, but they lost, I think it was 6 seats in some of the most Trumpy places that we had won in 2018. So our majority is, we do still have the majority. This is a bit dated in the House. There's no real question about that, but the majority is coming back a tad smaller. And you know, I think there's some soul searching happening at the national with the D-Trip, like what happened there, but that's part of why we can't really say it was a blue wave across the country, because it wasn't everywhere. And then this is just an image to share with you guys about the makeup of state legislatures. Part of what's eclipsed in the 2020 election is the outcome of those state legislative chambers has a lot to do with redistricting and reapportionment for the next 10 years, unless you're an independent commission state like we are. This used to look quite different. It used to be the majority of states were split chambers of some kind of way. Now, there's only 2 split chamber states left. And so we're gonna see probably a relatively polarized view of what redistricting and reapportionment looks like in those states. But largely it was status quo, but New Hampshire went red. So there's one more Republican trifecta than before 2020 on this last election. So a quick summary of what we were up to: 11 million phone calls over the course of the statewide coordinated campaign, and 5.1 million texts were sent as part of Colorado's effort. Underneath this, you can see, like, for example, on the phone shifts completed, that is 40,855 volunteer shifts across the state of Colorado to do the turnout work we did. And we had over 8,000 texters doing text shifts on our voter turnout in the state. We mostly did not knock, as you guys know. We did have a supplemental paid canvass in some low turnout concerned parts of the state that might affect Biden and Hickenlooper. And so there was a supplemental paid canvass in Denver, Arapahoe, Adams, and Pueblo. The Pueblo hope was to drive turnout for Diane Mitch Bush. Redistricting deadline. So when Y and Z passed a couple years ago, we are in that process for setting up reapportionment and redistricting for congressional and legislative lines. And I just figured, since I was sharing a political update with you guys today, tonight is the deadline. And we need more applicants. And we are really skewed in terms of lacking women and people of color. The gender balance is getting a little better, but it is still overwhelmingly Anglo. And if Republicans have put in like a handful of people of color, it really means that they're very likely to be seated on the commission. So if any of you know anybody who you think would be good, you might want to take down this link I've got right here, which is how to apply. And anyone who apply anytime before 11:59, before midnight tonight, that still comes in. I wanted to review the criteria real quickly though, because there's a couple disqualifiers. So anyone who holds a party position higher than a PCP level is disqualified. If a candidate has run for federal office or the state legislature in the last 5 years, they're disqualified. If they've been on a congressional or legislative campaign in the last 3 years, they're disqualified. And if they have been elected at the federal, state, county, or municipal level within the last 3 years, they're disqualified, or a registered lobbyist within the last 3 years. So that has also ruled some people out that might have otherwise been good. But if you know of anybody, feel free to encourage them to apply. So that is kind of my quick, not so quick overview of our political update. And we've got time for questions or discussion. And I'll take my screen sharing off.
Yeah, Kathy and Karen, can you start with the questions? You're muted, Kathy.
Yeah, I'm unmuted now. I'll start, Karen, because I've got the question that Ann sent in last night. It's kind of a multi-part question, Morgan. First of all, in 2018-19, you mentioned that the Udall-Gardner race was one of the first in the country targeted by Russian interference. Can you speak more to that now? Briefly, you just mentioned it before, you didn't discuss how it manifested. And two, did you see any such foreign interference this year? And if so, was it attempting to influence social media discourse, or was it more direct attacks on the election?
These are great questions. So yeah, what the questioner remembers is that Colorado was a testing ground on Cambridge Analytica, and they tested it in the year that we lost Mark Udall to Cory Gardner. That disinformation campaign has never stopped. It actually escalated. And we have learned some more since then. And so the short answer is yes, we saw interference again this year, but we were frankly better prepared for it. And we can talk about the ways that they interfered. But what we know now, a book called, excuse my language, but the book is called Mindfuck. So it is. And it's by the whistleblower, Christopher Wiley, who was at Cambridge Analytica. And the way they did their interference is they scraped all of your Facebook data. They built psychometric analyses to get a deep psychological profile on almost every single voter in America. Neuroses, they had like all these different, like how open, how neurotic, how this, how that, like it was partly political, but it was mostly a psychological profile. And what the whistleblower says is they ran a whole specific campaign targeting African Americans, which is tapping into that sense of marginalization, feeling left out and unheard. And they created a gazillion fake accounts that would go into the Facebook algorithm stream targeted to Black voters with things like, Why bother? There's no difference between the parties. The whole system's screwed up anyway. And Trump's language of like, what do you have to lose? You know, sort of the whole thing's a mess. So just sort of stay home. And that defeatist thread being promulgated both by automated bots, but also by live people in Russia, in warehouses, populating these streams of demoralization campaigns. We got more detail about how they did that, specifically targeting Black voters. But overall, on the progressive left, it was a continuous channel of anti-party, hating the party. They studied where the primary defaults were. They took seeds of how people really felt and hardened factions on this. And so that Cambridge Analytica has the same people who were behind that were behind Trump's reelection campaign. They dissolved that named entity, but that data still lives within the Republican Party now, basically. So what changed is a couple fold. I think we became more aware of the disinformation campaigns, right? Like the effort when we were picking our presidential nominees. You may remember that as soon as someone was doing well in the debate, suddenly there'd be hits against Kamala Harris, and then there'd be hits against Pete Buttigieg, and then there'd be hits against Joe Biden, and then there'd be this and that. A good number of that was actually coming from the right. And we did have some of our people liking, sharing, and forwarding that. But the other thing that changed is Facebook and Twitter started to get more serious about identifying fake accounts, and they shut down millions of fake accounts in the 2020 election. And then psychological attacks don't work as well when you know what they are and you see them for what they are. So frankly, we became a little bit more sophisticated users of the internet. And I think spotted some of that clickbait for what it was. There were attempts on cybersecurity on our internet, on our voting systems, on our voter registration systems, but they did not crack Colorado. As far as we know, they were not cracking anyplace else. And Jenna Griswold had done like a lot of cybersecurity toughening in this process. So we know there were attempts. They were not able to breach. Long answer, good questions. Hope that helps.
Thank you. I think it's
Okay.
Karen's turn. Karen, you're
Karen,
muted.
you're muted.
Thank you. How can we in Colorado help get the vote out in Georgia? And I put fairfight.com, and then there's another couple of things in the chat. And maybe you can explain how to save the chat in a simple way, Gwen. I can't remember exactly how.
Yeah, I can do that.
Someone wants all these links that will be at the end of this thing. Oh, it's down in the chat by, right on the right, it's 3 dots and it says save chat. So
check you out.
All
right. Okay, so on Georgia, the Georgia Democratic Party is putting together an email for us to give to all states at the same time about what they actually think is most helpful. For any of you who aren't part of our Democratic Dispatch that goes out tomorrow, we're hoping to have an update directly from them to share with everybody, and we'll use the dispatch. But in the meantime, mobilize.us, there's a Georgia account for mobilize.us. And if you bookmark it, the top 3 that come to the top are going to be volunteer activities that the Georgia Dems themselves think are the most helpful. So you can plug into a phone bank or a text bank, and they update those every day. So my default until I get the email from them would be to go to mobilize.us Georgia. It'll try and start with where you live. So just tell it Georgia and it will pull up those that are most useful. We are going to do a statewide Colorado fundraiser for Georgia on December 5th. Sandy Alt out of Douglas County is going to help host it. And it'll be a split between the 2 Democratic candidates going to runoff and to the Georgia Democratic Party on that. And so you can also help by signing up for that tomorrow when we announce that's out, and inviting anyone else at any level, you know, whether this is $25 or $2,500, you know, we want Colorado to just like do one big statewide fundraiser and know all that money is going directly to those campaigns. So that's another great way to help.
Okay, do you have any information about the specific counties who voted for Bush versus Boebert?
No, but when the canvas is done on this election, let me write down that question. Well, as far as counties that did, that won't take long, but I don't have it with me right this second. I could follow up maybe with Gwen or with Carroll, and we could just get you a by the county.
Okay, thank you.
I might mention that all of that kind of information is available on the Secretary of State's website. So there's just an absolute ton of information out there if anybody's interested in kind of digging down into the details.
Also, I think that Rural United Colorado has some statistics on that, and I can find those and get them to our folks on this call.
Great.
Thanks. Karen?
Next question, how did the truncated decennial census deadline affect the accuracy and results in Colorado? Do you know that?
Yeah. I think it's hard to compare what it would have been to, but it's very safe to say that we undercounted. I think the pandemic hurt us. I think the deadline being cut shorter than it could have been hurt us. You know, it'll be an interesting question if we're able to flip the Senate at the national level, if there's a federal legislative response to try and get net new people added back in, like can they reopen to supplement anyone who didn't get it in? I think without taking the US Senate, I think we are looking at going into this whole 10-year period with an undercount of who's here because of how they handled that.
Okay, do you have any information on voter registration and vote turnout by Latinos and Native Americans?
Yeah, we're starting to get that coming in. Friday, we're gonna, not on Native Americans, there's some modeled information. So we have better data about Latino turnout in Colorado and the country, and Colorado is gonna be finishing our report on Latino voting on Friday. But what I can tell you from having watched the early returns while they came in, the early vote rate was about double the clip. And we had the highest turnout on Latino voters than we've had in Colorado. And it's a question of just quantifying that into numbers. Native American is poorly modeled. You know, we don't actually collect race or ethnicity on voter registration. And for La Plata in particular, I know that Jenna Griswold hired specifically Native American voter registration and GOTV person on voting, but I am going to have to check, like the soft side, hard side wall on data goes down after the election. And sometimes there's more robust data on the soft side, like with America Votes, and we might have to look with a national partner to get better data on Native American turnout.
Thank you.
Bev has two questions in the chat. What can be done about changing the CD3 makeup? I guess you mean like, how do we slough off so many counties? And then what can be done about Mesa County where Boebert overtook DMB? Bush.
I think there's going to be a lot of interest in changing the makeup of the third. How that looks is partly, well, it's going to be a lot determined by the commission that we don't control, but there is a way we can influence it. And that is that the hearing process that's put in constitutionally, if we talk about everything we do and don't want in the third in terms of communities of interest and competitiveness, right? Like we saw CD3 could have been competitive, but it's been drawn in a way that basically is going to favor Republicans nearly forever like this. The internal politics is like, you feel sorry for the Dems in the very red counties, but it's probably going to mean shaving off a couple of the reddest counties on the perimeter because they still have criteria for compactness and contiguity. It may mean taking part of what's in CD2, you know, on that part of CD2 and maybe adding it to CD3, but the risk of that is that La Plata falls off geographically. So it might mean, and there's really no way to pull Mesa out of that because we can't make Mesa an island. So for La Plata to stay in the third, but for the third to become bluer probably means subtracting some counties to the east. And, you know, I think for those of you who know La Plata well and know the map well, I think it's helpful to have more than one option because if we put all our eggs in one basket, we may not get it. But like, okay, what if we subtracted this county? What if we subtracted that county? We'll get updated numbers about what the equal population number has to be, which is a constitutional requirement. And that will tell us everything about what we can subtract and still remain equal, or what we add so we can subtract really red areas. But bottom line is I do think there's a way to make CD3 bluer.
Is that's all related to the redistricting then?
It is. It's all related. And your best way to be involved is A, get people to submit a deadline, you know, by midnight tonight. And B, there will be, our redistricting effort is set up through a 501c4. And there will be paid organizers there trying to build the testimony that helps get our preferred maps. And there will be a point where we're going back to the counties locally to get local people willing to testify about why certain regions better fit and don't with others. And so when you get that kind of call through county leadership or anyone else that's on this meeting, like right now, that's the most impactful way you can help, is to get the testimony, because nonpartisan staff are actually drawing the lines. And if there's no record to make a case, it won't happen.
Okay, next question is there any hope that you see for additional Colorado congressional seats for the Dems?
I still think we have a good shot at picking up an 8th congressional district. And that might give us options on CD3 too, because it's inherently a bigger shakeup when you're adding a whole other district.
Okay.
Right. The next question is, any thoughts on what we can learn about our experience this year with coordinated campaigns?
Yeah, I think we want to do a statewide survey on this, but we went after the 2018 and 2016 coordinated, and some of the problems we saw before were like, really wanted to get ahead of those this year, and we still saw some of the same problems. One of the things we found is that because the highest campaigns that fund it just don't start until late, we did our pre-planning by collecting resumes, and we wanted a lot of local applicants, and by taking up voter registration. But we didn't know Biden. Like, we knew Hickenlooper was our nominee July 1. It took even longer to know Biden was it, and then it took longer for them to raise the money. So I think one thing I just never like about the coordinated is it is a huge ramp up of money very late. And the politics of the coordinated, like the presidential campaigns, like people come off of Elizabeth Warren's campaign, they're looking for work. So we still found, despite collecting more local resumes, that we still had a lot of people, in my experience, that were out of state. And then, because of COVID, we're told they couldn't move here. One of the things we tried, and it doesn't sound like it was successful, was we gave them a checklist. And one of those checklists included, you have to talk to the local counties. You cannot organize in their county without talking to them. You don't know their counties like they do. You don't know their voters like they do. And in some places, it feels like that went better than others.
I was thinking we were going to the.
And one thing that I think went pretty well on the coordinated was Biden's campaign from the top really did express interest in supporting local candidates. And so we always have some campaign finance limitations. But one of the things we did to adapt to COVID is we invested in Ballot Ready and populated Ballot Ready, which gave us all the way down to RTD commission local races so that people could look up and customize their own ballot as an investment in reducing undervote. And I do think that that's part of why we did better further down ballot, is we had more of a campaign program there, and we did get some resources from the coordinated with that, but it feels late. We had, for 30 days, we lost, in my opinion, time, because the Hickenlooper campaign was completely convinced that this state was not going to be targeted by Biden in the presidential. And I was telling them, everything I am hearing from the DNC themselves directly is that Colorado is a battleground state, a tier 2 battleground state. So is Hickenlooper top of the ticket, making the majority of the decisions? Is Biden top of the ticket, making majority of the decisions? Who does the majority of funding? It took almost 30 days before the Hickenlooper campaign really realized, like, no, like the DNC is targeting the state with Biden, because like DNC and Biden sort of merge. And then there were different hiring protocols. So the DNC had a vetting process that was quite rigorous, but it cost us, we lost a couple great promising organizers early because they were tired of waiting around for the vetting process. And the Biden campaign had like different COVID protocols than the Hickenlooper campaign. And then the Hickenlooper campaign had kind of a shakeup, and like I think they did much, much better in the last 60 days. But we literally had 2 different accounts. They weren't talking to each other. You know, so those structural things about, it sounds so simple, but it's like communication, it's flow of money. I had a win plan written in 2019 for 2020. I had pre-laid out where we could do offices based on where we had before. I had prior contracts of where we could go before. We had like a rough draw of how we could set up regions. But the politics of who the decision maker is and who's writing the checks and when the cash starts flowing pushed, in my view, the whole coordinated to be, again, very, very late despite early planning. So long answer, but we do need to think about this more, because some of these are structural problems. As long as funding is always late, and as long as I feel like the DNC and the DSCC on the US Senate could have pre-talked before the primary and just made some structural decisions, irrespective of who the nominees would be, and that could have gotten us almost 90 more days earlier on having our coordinated going. Bev's asking about Diane's late entry with the coordinated. I think yes, in that I think the DCCC had not looked at that race until Scott Tipton was defeated. And I don't know how much money exactly they put in. But I think had they adopted CD3 as a priority a year earlier, it would have helped. But they're never neutral in primaries. So back when we had a primary in CD3, they probably would have picked a candidate, and it may or may not have been the local candidate that people preferred. But that late entry Bev, I think, did hurt us a bit in CD3.
Morgan, there's a question about what you think about a lawsuit to address gerrymandering in CD3.
I don't think the lawsuit would go very far because these maps were ones that were approved by the courts. So when we were part of redistricting and reapportionment before, there was an initial set of maps on our commission that had bipartisan support. The Republicans then turned around and sued to challenge. And the final maps we got in Colorado over the last 10 years were court approved maps. So it's probably unlikely that the court would find that they themselves gerrymandered. I think our best energy is going forward about what can we do with that 8th congressional district, and what can we do to make sure that that 8th district isn't necessarily just another metro congressional district, but in fact can at least pick up a good part of rural counties so that there's representation. You know, like right now, all of Western Colorado and all of Southern Colorado and all of Eastern Colorado are basically a red wasteland of representation at the congressional level. So it would be really nice to share the love a little bit and get that focus on the future 3rd, I think.
Okay, let's see.
Thank you. Go ahead, Karen.
Unmute. Okay. We have a question about the VAN, Voter Access Network. Can the CDP mandate that other groups using VAN for VPBs, what's that, Kirby?
Virtual phone bank.
Virtual phone banking, oh, that's right. Enter data gained to at least correct wrong numbers and et cetera, because we've had a lot of problems with, you know, I mean, you know this.
Yeah. I think, I mean, the short answer is it's not exactly a mandate, but I think we can do better on training best practices on data and cleanup. It isn't a new issue. VAN's strength is it's decentralized. Its weakness is it's decentralized. There's a lot of users that hop on sometimes with no training, and campaigns can grant access that the state party doesn't really control, and counties can grant access that the state doesn't control. So we don't really have that gatekeeping ability to, like, hey, sign off to the following best practices on data first. But what we could do is, like, everyone who signs up for an account, like maybe we can create like an automatic email or something that sends a document that, you know, maybe has some best practices about cleaning out bad numbers. There was a group called Stack Labs that worked with data on all state parties, and they have some of the best data minds out there. It'd be good to run this question past them and see, has there been a system set up in another state that just does better on data integrity?
Can you say that again? Who are they? What are they called?
They're called Stack Labs. It's STAC, Stack Labs. And they were funded at the national level specifically to do more data support for the state parties.
Okay. Ann's asking, can you make the 8th district all about La Plata?
Well, if I'm the commission, I sure can, but I'm disqualified from serving on the commission. But I think as soon as we have local organizers, I think there is a real way to have an organized footprint around La Plata. And for your more data savvy folks in your county, I would pull up the political numbers, start playing some with a map and staring at what your surrounding neighbors are. because if you get pulled into a broader Southern Colorado district, it actually could get worse in a way, your geography, because there's so many red counties around you. You know, so it would mean maybe having some of your local folks figure out where all could La Plata be attached to that would still get us, you know, we're, as Ed Perlmutter put it, we're looking for every fair advantage. So like, you know, that gets us a decent shot at a blue flippable seat. And, you know, some of the counties around you are really, really, really red. So are there enough Dems in your population when I think last time, what was it, like 750,000 about in each one? As soon as we know what that equal population number is, it'll help you be like, okay, how many counties do I have to add to La Plata to hit that number? And who's near me? And start just taking a look at the closest populated blue counties you might want and have some ideas. So I think it's possible to work a district around that, but there's so many other voters that would be needed that you're going to have to sweep in an awful lot of other counties to hit the population number, and a lot of your neighbors are red.
I think that's perhaps all the questions, Gwen.
Okay, I did want to ask Morgan one question, and my internet's been flashing up as unstable, so if I'm cutting out, let me know. Because of this redistricting business, I really wasn't involved in this 10 years ago, and I'm curious as to how it works. Obviously, people could get removed from the district they've been serving in, and there's got to be a timeline to where we know by some date, what the new districts are going to look at so that we can start preparing to run campaigns, 2 years from now in those new districts. So can you just kind of give an overview of sort of the timing and how all that works?
Yeah, and it's different. So I will just say by background, I served as a commissioner on both reapportionment and congressional redistricting last time. So I saw the process up close. And it's totally different now. So the Y and Z criteria does not allow them to consider where an incumbent currently serves. So let me just hit some of the differences. You will have nonpartisan staff drawing these, and basically there's pretty strict ex-parte communications. So there's rules about who can talk directly to the commissioners, and basically those conversations have to happen in open meetings and recorded. So politically last time, we were able to do some planning and some organizing. We knew who our commissioners, I was appointed by the Senate majority leadership at that time to be, to represent the Democratic Senate. So on the new commission, they basically have the same constitutional criteria: equal population, contiguous, compact, but we added competitiveness, and we elevated the importance of communities of interest. So now, here's the timeline. I just pulled something up I'm looking at right now. Okay, so on January 5th, actually, can I share my screen again? Let me see if.
Yeah, you should be able to.
Can you guys see that?
Yes.
Okay, so where we are right now is, this is the deadline for applicants to submit their applications. This is the next step. So they start going through and organizing all the applications they get. There's a 3-judge panel that gets chosen in January of 2021. Then all the vetting they're doing over November, December, January 11th, there's a list of qualified applicants that can be considered like in the larger pool. There's a narrowing that's done to get that pool down to 1,050 applicants, and we may not have 1,050 applicants. And then there's criteria in there that they're looking at in the language of Y and Z to get 150 of what the judges think are the most qualified D's, U's, and R's based on the criteria. And then the judges, so this is totally different than what the process was last time. The first group of 6 applicants are randomly drawn by the judges. And so that has to include 2 D's, 2 R's, and 2 U's. Then they do a random draw of 2 more unaffiliateds to get in there. Legislative leadership in February from each chamber chooses, they get 10 choices each. 2 members from each party that comes from that. So it's like this very weird amalgamation. And then the judges do the finishing to try and make selections based on whoever's missing. So the criteria might say something about diversity, regional, rural diversity, applicants of color. If the mix they get by March 16th is clearly missing, then the judges can go back into that pool and kind of round out the commission to try and get it to meet the overall criteria. The 2 different commissions, like redistricting for congressional, legislative is a different commission, entirely parallel timelines. And then they have to meet before March 30th. And then they have to start having their first maps really prepared by April 30th and possibly sooner. So this is just a review of like what the criteria is that they have to be using in drawing the maps. And it requires that they visit each congressional district. I think maybe, yeah, at least 3 visits in each congressional district. One of the things you can do is try and have La Plata be a host of at least one of those CD3 stops to really elevate the voice of La Plata County. And they will be doing those tours from April when they have the maps through this July date. And that whole phase is an organizing phase where we can be getting your input. You can submit it in writing. You can testify. The final maps have to be approved by September 15th. And then December 29th on 2021 is the deadline for the Supreme Court to approve the maps and to officially file them with the Secretary of State. So we may not know the boundaries of where our legislative and congressional members are running in really until January of 2022. So anyone can file now, but there's a chance that the district they're in is different between the time they file and the time they're actually on the ballot.
So they would have to file, not, let's say you want to, run for the state Senate, you'd have to file based on whatever the heck your district is going to be rather than what it is right now.
Well, I think the only thing a candidate can do is file where they live now and have to amend their report. If what is Senate District 6 right now, for example, in the state legislature becomes Senate District 24 with different boundaries, then you have legally been raising where you are, but once there's a different map in there, you're going to have to get in there and edit your district number. And you might suddenly find you have a primary you didn't have before if 2 people who were previously running in separate seats now find that they're both running in the new boundaries together. Does that help?
That's good. Yeah, that's really good information, I think. In terms of us trying to plan, we obviously, are going to have to wait until January of 2022 to really start, any sort of campaigning for any of the candidates that are running.
It's really hard to know what, right? Like, I would call it soft campaigning. Like legally, it's nice to open an account because then you can raise money. But which voters you're talking to, hard to know. So if people are well liked broadly in the region, that helps. But direct voter contact, not really until you know those boundaries, or it's a crapshoot as to whether you're even talking and spending money to people who will eventually be able to vote for you.
Sure. Like I say, that's good info.
So Carol's asking, how can we ask to host a CD3 stop? And what I would do is there's staff at Legislative Council, the nonpartisan staff who's going to be, drawing maps and helping come up with a schedule. I would reach out to them and say, I noticed that there's supposed to be 3 stops for each congressional district. La Plata would like to be a host. They may all be virtual anyway. But I would reach out to Leg Council and ask them who staff is on redistricting and just let them know that you'd regionally be interested in being a host, Carol.
Okay, I think that's it on questions. Do you see any more, Karen or Kathy? Are we
Well,
good?
since tonight is the deadline, midnight, to apply for the redistricting, do we need to get the word out to other people, or did you say that nobody on our executive committee, you're ineligible?
Yeah, if you hold any position higher than PCP, you're ineligible. The only thing I would say is that it's probably going to be more effective to pick up the phone to 1 or 2 people you know than to put it on Facebook. I think it is risky to put the strategy out there. And even one person you know who might, and I think about this as either people who are maybe active in a nonprofit in the community, but not necessarily active in the party, but they're really allies. That's kind of a good footprint to think about, because they need to be involved enough to be able to represent the community.
I have a quick question that brings up. I know of 2 women here in La Plata County that have applied. Maya Kane, who is on this call, who's a lawyer here and has been very helpful, working really hard in this campaign. The other person who has applied is a former school board member here, Stephanie Moran, and she is actually currently on our executive committee. Would she need to remove herself from the executive committee to be considered?
Was she appointed?
Yes.
I think
she was
she's
appointed.
Fine.
Okay.
I think it says elected.
Okay, great.
Party official. So my quick reading is elected doesn't mean appointed.
Sounds good. Thank you.
I have a quick question if there's time. Going back to the redistricting thing, it's true that the final maps won't be known until the end of the year, but the preliminary maps will be known months ahead. And it may well be that in some of the districts, there's no question who's in which district, and it's only at the margins. So I don't think it's that everybody is in the dark until December 29th of next year.
That's right. So open records applies to this process. So in April, when there's preliminary maps, they will be ideally really posted on a website is the easiest way to comply with the Open Records Act in Colorado. We will share as the state party links to any of the proposed maps we see. And then when you're commenting, it would be like, there's a name of the map, map name, number, blah, blah, blah. Here's my testimony of why I do or don't like this particular map. And we'll help get links out so people can take a look at the proposed maps.
Yeah, that's a good point, Dick. I hadn't really thought about it quite that way. Anyone else have questions or announcements?
I know that's heavy. That is a huge political dose, but I guess I just want to say, La Plata County, you guys were incredible on this last election cycle. You should be really proud of what you did as the county. And I share your hope for a better district going forward for 2022. Let's make sure that Lauren's a one-termer because it's just such an affront that that person would even be in Congress pretending to represent people is appalling. But we owe you a debt of gratitude. You're an amazing organizing hub in the state, and your turnout is just killer. So thank you.
Someone mentioned, can't we work on a recall for her now? And I heard that's, I mean, it's not, what's the steps to recall her when Lauren Boebert is in office and starts whatever, and doing stupid things?
So our recall laws don't apply to federal candidates. So it's just our good local candidates that keep getting recalled by Republicans. And they're using that against some Westminster City Council folks now. And I know Routt County just beat back an attempt where they almost got the signatures there. But yeah, for better or for worse, our recall laws do not apply to federal candidates.
Is it impeachment then? I mean, if she steps in some kind of doo-doo financially, I'm thinking money is going to be a big one to get her on, because
I have to research that, Karen. I think impeachment applies to judges and the president. I don't know that that applies to Congress. I'd have to do some research.
Okay, thanks.
I can't blame you for like just not really wanting to wait for 2 years. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Maybe you should ask Nancy Pelosi what she has in mind.
Right. Maybe she can like be put on the committee of one by herself. And then you guys can just adopt one of the other Congress people until we get an upgrade, just in the buddy system of like, all right, well, maybe we'll pick Ed Perlmutter or Jason Crow or someone else, so you guys aren't so out in the cold here.
Okay, well, I'd like to thank Morgan. Let's everybody give her a virtual round of applause.
Hear, hear.
We really appreciate you taking your time. And I did see one thing here that Karen Pontius's birthday is tomorrow, so happy birthday, Karen. I'm sure you're 39-ish or thereabouts.
Happy birthday.
Yes.
So we'll hope everybody will join us in January. The committee will start working here shortly on our speakers for starting next year. And hopefully, at least by the time we get partway through the year, we can get back to where we're getting together physically in a safe way. So thanks, everybody. And we'll have the recording on this out in just a couple of days, I think.
I have one thing to add. Our son just texted that the schools are closing. So we have a grandson in preschool, and the school district has pulled the plug and they're shutting down starting tomorrow. So it's happening, yeah.
All right, guys, that's tough news, tough times, but I am going to go ahead and sign off, and thank you for the invite. It's good to see everybody again, and really looking forward to when we can do this in person.
Thanks so much,
All right.
Morgan.
Thank you.
Thank you guys, and let's
Thanks,
go,
everyone.
Marcia. Let's get Marcia. Woohoo.
Go, Marcia.
Bye.